Welcome back to the Brittany Hughes Show. Happy Friday, everybody, which actually is going to be our new show day moving forward. We've made a few changes here at MRC-TV and switched some stuff around. Nothing that greatly impacts anybody other than us, but I do know some of you have reached out asking what's happened. There haven't been any new podcast episodes for the past couple of weeks. Part of that is due to the fact that I was on a scheduled vacation with my family last week, but we also made some small internal changes here at MRC, mostly to do with scheduling and things like that. So for the time being, it looks like you can expect new episodes of the Brittany Hughes Show on Fridays now instead of Thursday, as we had previously been airing them. This was a little bit of a spur-of-the-moment decision, but I think it's going to be very positive moving forward. But I do promise I will be more diligent in letting you know if there are any other tweaks that we make. I do apologize for any confusion. But of course, as soon as we decide to switch things around a little bit here and I take a few days to go out of town, the world decides to explode. So we've got a lot to catch up on. And while the media have been focused entirely on Iran this week, they left plenty of notable stories out of the conversation because the media are not in the business of telling you the truth. They are in the business of crafting a narrative and spoon-feeding you the information that they want you to have through a particular lens and omitting whatever does not fit their agenda. And that's exactly what we saw this week. Now, it was not lost on me the complete about-face that the media did this week while trying to figure out exactly what they wanted to be outraged about, okay? Because when Joe Biden was in office, right, everything was always a basket of roses. We had sky-high grocery prices, an energy crisis, we had a border crisis, we had out-of-control crime, everything was going to pot, and there's the media being like, well, the economy is great, and Joe Biden is sharp as a tack, and why is everybody so mad? Everything is wonderful. But now that Trump is back in the White House, everything's on fire and we're supposed to be pissed about all of it. And this week, of course, was absolutely no exception. But it was really funny if you paid attention this week. The left seemed to be having a lot of trouble trying to figure out exactly what it was they were mad about. Okay, so when it came out that Trump had first ordered the military strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, the first reaction from the left and from the media was just absolute apoplexy. How dare you bomb Iran? You're going to get us into World War III. There were plenty of leftists who were questioning why we're allowing Israel to have nuclear weapons, but not Iran, because they don't make the distinction between Israel being the only democracy in the Middle East and Iran being a state sponsor of terrorism that wishes death to America, because many leftists are terrorists who hate America. So that's perfectly fine with them. So it was, how dare you bomb Iran? This is a declaration of war without the authorization of Congress, which is not true. It wasn't. Jasmine Crockett, regardless of what she wants you to believe, was not owed a classified briefing on the subject. But the left is absolutely outraged that Trump would order such a military operation in the first place. And then it comes out that maybe we didn't quite destroy Iran's nuke program quite as thoroughly as had been originally claimed. We're still not exactly sure how much of their facilities we took out. There might be a good chunk of their operation still intact. Maybe the Trump administration was too quick on the draw in claiming that Iran's nuclear program was totally obliterated. That is now the question. There's still intelligence coming in. Obviously, we are not all privy to all of that information, but that's kind of what's being sussed out now. And all of a sudden, the left and the media, who 2 seconds ago were irate that Trump had bombed Iran in the first place, are now squawking that Trump didn't bomb them hard enough. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Well, you may have left too much of their program actually intact. They're mad that Trump bombed Iran in the first place because, God forbid, we keep terrorists from developing weapons of mass destruction. And 2 seconds later, they're mad that we didn't decimate the whole thing to their liking. You cannot win for losing with these people. If Trump hadn't bombed Iran at all, and then we found out that Iran was able to develop nuclear weapons, leftists would blame Trump for letting Iran become a nuclear power. There is nothing that this man can do. This really has nothing to do with Iran, if you think about it, or American security, or Israel, or what is best for this country or for the rest of the world. This is about leftists hating Trump no matter what he does, simply because he's the one doing it. This man could cure cancer tomorrow. And the left would accuse him of waging war on oncologists and putting healthcare professionals out of business. That would be the take. There is nothing that this man is going to do right for them at all, ever. They will find a reason to be mad about it, and they will try to convince you to be mad about it. So meanwhile, while the media are focused on hating any move that this man makes on principle, Trump's DHS, Department of Homeland Security, nabbed 11 Iranians, including some illegal aliens, convicted criminals, known terrorism affiliates, and members of the Iranian army who were in this country, many of them having been let in by the Biden administration that didn't give a crap about national security when they opened up our borders to God only knows who by the millions. And the media didn't care because they only care about threats to America when they think they can blame a Republican for it, right? That's the criteria here. In the meantime, here are just a few of the people that ICE picked up this week in case you needed a little bit more anxiety today. I'm going to butcher these people's names, by the way, and I don't even really care because, frankly, I don't like the fact that I'm having to speak their names in the first place. But here we go. Yusuf Mehredeno, whose name appears on the terror watch list. He was arrested by ICE outside of Jackson, Mississippi, after the feds discovered he'd lied on a visa application after he had already been living in the country illegally for 8 years. They also found he potentially committed marriage fraud, according to DHS. Now, why in the world would he do that? Why does he want to stay in the United States so bad? I wonder. Mehran Makari Sahel is a former Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps member who has admitted connections to the Iran-based terrorist group Hezbollah, according to CBS News, Iran-backed terrorist group. Ribvar Karmi was arrested in northern Alabama on Sunday. He was found to be carrying an Iranian army ID card that revealed he was a sniper. Between 2018 and 2021, he had entered the United States in October of 2024 on a K-1 visa for immigrants who are engaged to American citizens, but he never adjusted his status as was required by the program, which makes him an illegal alien, according to the Department of Homeland Security. So CBS Evening News, to their credit, reported that 5 of the 11 Iranians that were swept up by ICE in all of this, had previous criminal convictions, including grand larceny and drug and firearm possession. So that was CBS Evening News. MRC's Newsbusters absolutely scoured ABC and NBC News and found both of those networks completely ignored this story, which I will say is awfully weird for journalists who are now so concerned about the possibility of Iranian retaliation for Trump's military strike. You would think that if you were worried about a terrorism threat against the United States, you would at least think about reporting on terrorism-linked Iranian illegal aliens found in this country carrying things like their Iranian army sniper card or, an I Heart Hezbollah bumper sticker. But see, these people didn't come here in the last 5 months under Trump. Many of them were here already. Many of them came in under the Biden administration, when anybody and everybody was just pouring across our border by the millions, and President Pudding Cup had absolutely no interest in determining who they were or whether they should actually be here. God only knows who was allowed into this country. It's bad enough that we find people with criminal convictions in their home countries, with criminal convictions already here in the United States. It's bad enough when we have people coming in who, rob and murder American citizens. Just known criminals, gangbangers. All of that has been proven. That's bad enough. But you think about the potential links to terrorism. You think about the people that could have been coming across the border who have links to state sponsors of terrorism, and what kind of people could be currently residing in this country just waiting for a directive to do us harm. This is the problem with open borders. But instead of reporting on the terrorist threats right here in this country, the media are instead doing things like devoting hours and hours of coverage to the Trump administration trying to deport Mahmoud Khalil, who is a foreign national who led anti-Semitic riots on college campuses in support of Hamas, where protesters called for the annihilation of Israel and death to the Jews. That's who they're stumping for. Iranian snipers living here in the United States illegally, totally fine. But a terrorism sympathizer leading anti-Jew riots on Columbia University's campus gets hundreds of sob stories, hours and hours and hours of coverage by pearl-clutching liberal journalists, a pass from an activist judge, and a personal congressional escort from Democrats back home. Tell me more about how concerned you are with national security, libs. Really. So as the left and their media lapdogs, these guys care as much about keeping Americans safe from foreign threats as they do about protecting children when they're not trying to butcher them in the womb, by the way, because here's another story that the media completely ignored this week and frankly has been ignoring for the past 4 years: the Biden administration's known and willful complicity in a massive human trafficking scheme that endangered the safety and the lives of countless migrant children who were hauled across the U.S. border illegally and shipped off to God only knows who, while so-called journalists looked the other way. Now, you may have missed this one because Lord knows it wasn't even a footnote for most news networks, but Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. testified before Congress this week. He gave horrific details about the reality of Biden's open border policies. Here's what he told members of the House Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Health.
The major reason that the Biden administration lost track of all those children is because they were emphasizing speed over security. And there were political reasons for that. They wanted to get the kids out of U.S. custody, so they were handing them off to anybody. It didn't require background checks. It didn't require identification even. I've watched horror stories of the same person picking up child after child after child, using different names and different addresses. One of the addresses was a strip club. One of the addresses was a parking lot. One of the addresses was an empty lot that was filled with shipping containers. And this character was getting all these kids. One person got 42 kids to one address. What we're doing now is DNA testing on every sponsor. We're doing personal identification. We're doing background checks, and we're doing income verification.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Now, if you were to read anything on RFK Jr.'s testimony before Congress this week, if you were to Google that, if you were to look it up, this is not much of a mention. Okay, the media ran with, Democrats grilling him on his position on vaccines and all of that stuff, but this was barely mentioned by anyone, much less the leftist news media. It's painful how not surprised I am that they would ignore this. They ignored this crisis the entire time it was happening because they didn't want to criticize Biden and his open border policies because they had just spent the previous 4 years blasting the Trump administration for ripping apart families when his administration did things like separate children from adults that they might not be related to and do things like DNA testing and verifying that they weren't being trafficked by abusers, which is a known and common problem at the border, by the way, and that takes time. It requires separating children and holding people and waiting for test results to come back. It requires actually doing your due diligence rather than just slapping the label of compassion on everything and funneling people through because it's a bad look to hold anybody for more than 5 seconds to try to figure out who they actually are. Now, here's the Biden administration who, in the interest of saving face with leftists who don't want borders at all, were just shoving millions of migrants into this country like a giant turnstile, weren't bothering to check IDs, weren't bothering to check if these self-declared families were even related to one another, were not giving out notices to appear in court for an immigration hearing in many cases. MRC-TV reported on that back in 2023. I believe a lot of these these people were being released into the country with a bus ticket and didn't even have an immigration court hearing. We have no idea where they disappeared off to, including many children. Now it turns out, gosh, that wasn't exactly a great system for making sure that children aren't being trafficked and abused by evil people. Fancy that, if only someone had said that at the time. Which they did, by the way. Perhaps the saddest part about all of this was that this was well known. It was an open secret. It just wasn't getting airtime by any of the major news networks except for maybe Fox. So in 2023, the New York Times, to their credit, ran an article written by an investigative journalist named Hannah Dreher, who wrote a very well-done feature on migrant children who had come across the border under the Biden administration and had been released into the country, many of them never to be seen or heard from again. There was no follow-up by the administration. Health and Human Services did not check to see that these kids ended up in safe places. Here's what Dreher wrote about literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of illegal alien children. Arriving in record numbers, they're ending up in dangerous jobs that violate child labor laws, including in factories that make products for well-known brands like Cheetos and Fruit of the Loom. This article detailed confirmed stories of migrant children as young as 12 and 13 years old found working in factories, hotels, farms, and construction sites. Here's what Dreher found. In many parts of the country, middle and high school teachers in English language learner programs say it is now common for nearly all of their students to rush off to long shifts after their classes end. They should not be working 12-hour days, but it's happening here, said a language arts teacher at Homestead Middle School near Miami. For the past 3 years, she said almost every 8th grader in her English learner program of about 100 students was also carrying an adult workload. Dreher also found migrant child labor benefits both under-the-table operations and global corporations. In Los Angeles, children stitch Made in America tags into J. Crew shirts. They bake dinner rolls sold at Walmart and Target, process milk used in Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and help debone chicken sold at Whole Foods. As recently as the fall, middle schoolers made Fruit of the Loom socks in Alabama. In Michigan, children make auto parts used by Ford and General Motors. Many of these companies, by the way, and the executives that run them donate heavily to Democrat politicians who then turn around and provide the very child labor that these companies benefit from, and these kids were being pumped into the country by the millions under Democrat administrations. According to Open Secrets, Target Corp executives and employees, for example, donated over $218,000 to Kamala Harris's campaign in 2024, making her their top donation recipient last year during the campaign cycle. Walmart executives and employees contributed over $366,000 to Harris's campaign. She was also their top beneficiary. Ford's executives and employees gave her just under $200,000 compared to $92,000 for Trump. Ford's second highest donation recipient was the anti-Trump Lincoln Project, who got over $100,000. Again, due to federal campaign finance laws, it's important to note that these are individual contributions from people, from whether it's the company owners or employees or members. It's not the actual company itself, but it does show where the company's values and their political ideologies are. And according to the New York Times, these are the same companies that turn around and directly benefit from the illegal child labor that is provided by these migrant kids, which the Biden administration was happy to provide by the millions. Coincidence? I mean, if you think that, I got some oceanfront property in Kansas I'd like to discuss with you. The year after that article was published, it was revealed in an HHS Office of Refugee Resettlement report that the Biden administration had lost track of some 300,000 migrant children who had been dragged across the border and released into this country, but we had no idea where they ended up. Many were not given notices to appear in court. They weren't being followed up with. They were shipped off to a sponsor somewhere in the United States, many of whom were not being vetted, and they were lost into the ether. And rather than hold the Biden administration accountable for being a willing cog in what is clearly a human trafficking ring, the media were praising him for his compassion and absolutely railing against anybody who pointed out that this open border policy was incredibly dangerous, not only to the national security of this country, not only to the citizens and residents of this country, but to the migrants, many of whom are children who are being exploited by it. And it turns out that is exactly what was happening. I mean, here's RFK Jr. saying, look, now we're trying to clean up this mess, okay? Trying to make sure that these kids are safe, that they're going to safe places, trying to figure out where they even are, that the people claiming to be their relatives are actually their relatives and not sex traffickers or rapists or somebody who's going to make them take a full-time job at a factory at 12 years old to pay the bills. We've got to put some safety rails on this thing. And yet somehow to the left, somehow to the media, it's the Trump administration who is abusing migrants, oppressing people, and who doesn't care about migrants and their children. Riddle me that. Sending some Guatemalan kid to an abusive home so he can be ripped out of school and shoved into a strawberry field to pick your cheap produce is not compassion. When the left says, well, we need migrants to, pick our crops and wash our sheets at the Holiday Inn Express, this is who they mean. This is exploitation. This is abuse. I know the left has always had a hard time letting go of their slaves, but that is exactly what this is. And the media have been complicit for years, and they do it under the guise of compassion, to make you feel like you're evil and you're bigoted and you're cruel for wanting a system of rules that, yes, does require a process that people are going to have to go through, but it's to keep horrific things like this from happening. The media lie to you. They will peddle all kinds of propaganda from the Palestinian Authority about, atrocities against children in Gaza, many of which turn out not to be true, by the way. But those that do are because Hamas hides their missile silos in the children's wing of their hospital. I mean, the media will stump for Iran, where women are abused and oppressed and gay people are beaten to death, but God forbid a president with a spine actually put terrorists in their place. The media will wring their hands over terrorism sympathizers and MS-13 gangbangers getting booted out of the country, but when a Democrat welcomes Iranian snipers across the border and sends thousands of vulnerable migrant children to abusive homes and sex trafficking rings and child labor mills, we get crickets. Please tell me who actually cares about children. None of this is compassion. It's a lie being force-fed to the American people to fuel a political agenda. And the media are complicit. And that's what they didn't tell you this week. And that's the Brittany Hughes Show. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back here again next Friday, not Thursday, Friday. Head over to the Brittany Hughes Show on Apple Podcasts. Hit the subscribe button so you don't ever miss an episode. You are also going to want to subscribe to the Newsbusters podcast. It's on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays with Tim Graham. Make sure that you subscribe to that one. You do not want to miss it. I'll see you guys back here next Friday. In the meantime, I hope you have a fantastic weekend and a blessed week ahead.